Welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. If you are a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please let us know that you're here by posting a comment either on our live Facebook feed or YouTube feed, or by getting in touch with our membership director, Bethany Thornton, at sunnyhillmembership@gmail.com. We would love to let you know how you can connect with the congregation even during this time when our building is closed. Our opening words are a poem written by Marin Tirabassi titled Improv on America the Beautiful. Beautiful are spacious skies, not just Wyoming and South Dakota, where open seems to go on forever. Beautiful are dark Maine forests, Detroit streets, and Carlsbad caverns. Beautiful are amber grains and also the indigo waves of the Pacific, purple mountains, urban canyons, and Mississippi Delta too. Beautiful are fruited places, Washington apples and Georgia peaches, Texas grapefruit, Finger Lake grapes, and the hands that pick that fruit. Beautiful are the pilgrim feet of Plymouth Rock and Ellis Island. More lovely are those feet when they stand humble before Trail of Tears feet, the feet of those brought here in chains, feet blistered crossing the desert, feet in ankle bracelets of ice. Beautiful are heroes of so many wars, those who gave their lives and families who gave their loves, and beautiful are others who came back troubled in their hearts and those who welcome them home. Beautiful are heroes of many kinds who fight fires, guard coasts, ride ambulances, teach schools, check out library books, foster and adopt children. Beautiful are emergency room staff, social workers, addiction counselors, and many others, not just in general and not just once a year. This Navajo poet on the reservation, this boxing coach in the Bronx, this camp counselor on a New Hampshire mountain. That child yet to be born, the dawn of many tomorrow's sky. Once again, welcome to Sunnyhill and this online worship service.
Please join us in saying the words for lighting our chalice. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our faith, a faith built on freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that demands living lives of goodness. This tiny flame is the symbol of all this within each of us. Please rise in body and or spirit and join us in singing our hymn, Circle Round for Freedom.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release. Circle Circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Once upon a time, there was a very greedy king who had lots and lots of gold. But he wanted even more gold, so he decided to order his army to attack a neighboring kingdom and steal all of their gold. The king called all his soldiers into this big palace courtyard and told them the plan. And the soldiers agreed to obey him. They drew their swords and they lifted their shields and they marched off into battle. But the soldiers weren't gone from the castle very long before they began returning to the courtyard, and not one of them was carrying a sword or a shield. Well, the king screamed, "What happened? I told you to go fight a battle and bring home some gold." "Well," one of the men said, "we were on our way, sire, when we came across an apple tree, and that apple tree spoke to us. It said, 'All people of the earth are one family. Lay down your swords and shields and study war no more.'" The man said, "It seemed to make sense to us. So that's what we did. Well, the king was furious, and he vowed to get rid of that apple tree that had ruined his plans to get more gold. He waited until late that night, around midnight, and he crept out of the castle across the field until he came to that tree. And he took his axe out and began to chop and chop and chop furiously until it lay on the ground. And then he was still so mad that he stomped and stomped and stomped on the fallen tree until it was crushed into the earth. And the king returned to the castle with a smile on his face. Well, the next day again, he ordered all his soldiers to the courtyard. He gave them new swords and new shields, and the same orders again to go attack the neighboring kingdom. The soldiers were afraid of the king, and so they did what they were told to do. But the soldiers weren't gone long before they started returning, once again without their swords and without their shields. This made the king absolutely enraged. "I told you to go fight a battle," he screamed. "Well, we were on our way," said one of the soldiers, "but we came to the spot where we had seen the apple tree yesterday. And you wouldn't believe it, but there are 20 apple trees there. And they were all saying the same thing. All the people of the earth are one family. Be wise and lay down your swords and shields and study war no more." And these trees, the soldier said, made sense to us. So that's what we did. The king was just red with anger. "Those blasted trees," he said. "Tonight, I will sneak out and chop down every last one." And that's what he did. He chopped down all 20 of the trees, but again, he was still so mad that he began jumping up and down on top of them until all of the trees were crushed into the earth. The next day, the king once again called all the soldiers to the courtyard, gave them new swords, new shields, and ordered them to attack the neighboring kingdom and bring back all the gold. The soldiers, again, were very frightened and afraid of this king and dared not to disobey him. So they went off, but it wasn't long before they started coming back without their swords and without their shields. The king screamed once again, "I told you to go to battle. Why do you disobey me?" "Well," said one of the soldiers, "you wouldn't believe it, but in the same place where yesterday there were 20 apple trees, now there is an entire forest of trees. And they are all saying," but the king interrupted him and said, "I know what they're saying." He knew what the trees were saying, and he ran out of the castle, and there he saw the forest of trees that stretched as far as the eye could see. The king began to cry and scream because he knew there was no way that he could chop down so many trees. "Can it be," he screamed, "that a powerful king like myself can be stopped by a few trees?" And a voice said, "Are you asking me?" And the king looked behind him, and he saw an old man leaning against the castle walls. His hair and his beard were long and gray, and his clothes were well worn and tattered. "Well," said the king after a moment, "do you have an answer? If so, please tell me." "Well," said the old man, and then he paused for a moment. "It seems to me that you are a very powerful king." "Yes, indeed, I am," agreed the king. And since you are so powerful, you can take any tree that offends you and chop it into little pieces and crush it into the ground. The king said, "You're quite right there. In fact, I've done it before and I could do it again." "But," said the old man, "the apple tree spoke the truth. All of the people of earth are one family. You may be powerful, but there is no king on earth more powerful than the truth. For truth crushed to the earth will rise again."
Sometimes I lay under the moon, I thank God I'm breathing. Then I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I'm here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around. 'Cause all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't wanna fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, oh. One day, one day, one day, oh. It's not about win or lose, 'cause we all lose when we lean on the souls of the innocent. Blood drenched pavement, keep on moving though the water stay raging. In this maze you can lose your way, your way. Might drive you crazy, but don't let it phase you away, away. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around. 'Cause all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't wanna fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, oh. One day, one day, one day, oh. When this will all change, treat people the same. Stop with the violence, down with the hate. When they will all be free and proud to be under the same sun, singing songs of freedom like my own. Like oh, why oh, why oh. All my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't wanna fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, oh. One day, one day, one day, oh. One day, one day, one day, oh. One day, one day, one day, oh.
There were no joys or sorrows submitted in time for today's service, but let us keep in mind all of the joys and sorrows that are left unsaid. To all and everyone, we hold you in our hearts. I invite you now to join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. We pause during this 4th of July weekend, during a time of great unrest and great change in our country, to gather ourselves, to center ourselves, and to remember that real freedom never comes without a struggle, without a cost. To remember that real freedom has nothing to do with the blathering of demagogues who wrap themselves in the flag while laying waste to human rights and human dignity. To remember that real freedom has less to do with freedom from something than it has to do with freedom for something. To remember that freedom and responsibility must go hand in hand. To remember that real freedom is celebrated not so much through fireworks and flag waving, but through faithful action, through working for justice rooted in love. As we observe a moment of silence, let us remember those who have given their lives in the struggle for freedom. And let us reflect on our own commitments to love and justice as the struggle continues in our own time. May the light of freedom guide us on our way. May the warmth of love strengthen and sustain us. And may the mighty sword of justice once again clear the path toward a world in which everyone is liberated from the shackles of oppression. Amen. If you're looking for freedom, you won't find it alone. But if we walk that road together, freedom's gonna light the way home. And if you're looking for justice, you won't find it alone. we walk that road together, justice is gonna light the way home. And if you're looking for peace, sweet peace, you won't find it alone. If we walk that road together, peace is gonna light the way home. If you're looking for freedom, you won't find it alone. If we walk that road together, freedom's gonna light the way home. I will confess to you that until recently, I found myself growing somewhat cynical about the efficacy of protests, marches, and demonstrations in bringing about real political and social change. Having participated myself over the past several years in such events as the Women's March, the March for Our Lives, protests related to the killing of Antoine Rose here in Pittsburgh, climate change marches, and other such events, and not seeing much, if any, changes in laws and policies, especially on the national level, I have found myself sometimes wondering, what is the point? And I suspect that some of you have wondered the same thing. Is another march or another protest really going to make any difference in the face of so many problems and so many very real and very deep challenges? But over the past month or so, my faith in mass social movements and mass uprisings has been restored and renewed. With hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets repeatedly across the country and around the world in recent weeks, we have begun to see the power of the people unleashed. Without such uprisings, the current conversation about reimagining, restructuring, or abolishing police as we know it in this country simply would not have happened. Suddenly, a movement that seemed only a distant, abstract notion a few months ago has some real momentum and some accompanying concrete policy and legal initiatives that seem to be going forward. It is by no means a foregone conclusion that these initiatives will result in real and lasting, meaningful change. As Robert Reich recently pointed out, history has taught us that mass protests against structural oppression can either lead to liberation or to brutal repression. But I am hopeful that what is happening now will lead toward liberation, and I am committed to doing everything I can to work toward that end. What I think we're seeing in this particular moment is the start of what could be the next American Revolution. Our Declaration of Independence states that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, meaning life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. That's a statement of moral law that supersedes existing statutory laws and practices. It is a bold and timeless statement about the fundamental right of the people to throw off any form of government that impedes their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The case can be made, and I believe must be made, that our current government is in fact destructive of the most basic of our human rights. A study by political scientists Martin Gillens of Princeton and Benjamin Page of Northwestern indicates that America is more akin to Russia in the way that it is governed than it is to democracies like France or the UK. The bottom line is that the interests and the well-being of most of our citizens are not being served or represented in our country. According to this study and other similar studies, America currently functions as an oligarchy in which the interests of the rich and powerful hold sway over the rights of everyone else. It is important for us to have this larger perspective, as painful as it might be to acknowledge, because it will affect our approach to addressing the problems and challenges that we are currently facing. If the system as a whole is failing most Americans, which it is, then it must be fundamentally altered. It's not enough just to win a few elections here or there or change a few laws or policies. There must be wholesale change. And wholesale change is what's being called for by the uprisings that are at the center of the new revolution that has begun. And what's being torn down is centuries of white, Eurocentric, patriarchal dominance. Daniel Araya, writing in Forbes, not exactly a radical leftist news outlet, states it as follows. The dominant story of America as an exclusive annex of European civilization is now coming to an end. The main question that remains is what story will hold the country together? What remains of the United States as the story of Western imperialism and the structures of white supremacy continue to fray and unravel? The answer to this question, Araya says, is that a new story will come. The new story will be determined by a new generation of Americans whose histories are varied and complex. In addition to the story of European settlement, new perspectives of enslaved Americans and Americans who have suffered settlement as genocide, and immigrant Americans who have no relation to Europe will commingle to produce something new. Araya continues, beyond the cultural homogeneity that first built the United States into a superpower, this crisis era is now accelerating a vigorous cultural hybridity. That is to say, a unity without uniformity and a diversity without fragmentation. This new movement, this new revolution, is different from others as it sometimes appears leaderless. There is not one great leader or a few great leaders that people can point to and say, here's the person we will follow, the person who will be our great deliverer. Instead, there is a decentralized but highly mobile and highly motivated set of organizers across the country, employing social media and texting to get people out on the streets and to get their message heard. And the message that's being sent and heard is that the old system, the old social order, is not working, and in fact has never worked for large segments of our population, which means that the system must be fundamentally altered or abolished, as our Declaration of Independence states. For us, as Unitarian Universalists, as religious liberals, altering or abolishing our current social, political, and economic system will mean doing at least two very difficult, very challenging things. The first is that we must be willing to give up some of our privilege and security in order to bring about real change. Liberals have, for many decades, if not centuries, had the privilege of the protection of the system, even if we have often criticized and admonished that same system. But it is crucially important at this point that we turn away from the comforts and privileges that may have been afforded us, simply on the basis of our race, ethnicity, relative wealth, social position, and education. The second thing that we as religious liberals must be willing to do is to move from the realm of abstract ideas to the realm of concrete action. We love to discuss and debate ideas, but now more than ever before, what is called for is action in solidarity with those who are most deeply affected, oppressed, and marginalized by the current order of things. What's needed is to move from liberal thought to liberative action. Moving, in other words, from liberalism to liberation, which always means moving toward action. This action may start on the streets, but it also requires our presence in school board meetings and municipal government meetings, in county seats, and in state capitals. It requires our presence and our faithful action in every aspect of our society. For centuries, one of the central tenets of liberalism, or more recently, neoliberalism if you prefer, has been that liberal orthodoxy, meaning right thought or belief, is more important than orthopraxy, meaning right action. But right belief has never gotten us anywhere without right and righteous action. As Michelle Alexander, author of The New Jim Crow, recently wrote, "Our only hope for our collective liberation is a politics of deep solidarity rooted in love." In recent days, she says, we've seen what it looks like when people of all races, ethnicities, genders, and backgrounds rise up together, standing in solidarity for justice, protesting, marching, and singing together, even as SWAT teams and tanks roll in. Alexander continues, "We've seen our faces in another American mirror, a reflection of the best of who we are and what we can become. These images may not have dominated the media coverage, but I've glimpsed in a foggy mirror scenes of a beautiful, courageous nation struggling to be born." What I suggest to you is that we can't be absent at this birth that is taking place. We can't be like fathers from a bygone era who used to sit in the waiting room or the bar while someone else did the hard work of giving birth. We must be present, engaged, and actively involved in the work of this beautiful, courageous nation that is struggling to be born. And we can't let ourselves nod off and fall asleep during this critical time in our nation's history. Martin Luther King Jr. was fond of telling the cautionary story of Rip Van Winkle. And I will mention parenthetically that I am aware that white people over the past 50 years or so have often cited King as a means of maintaining the current social, economic, and political status quo, as a means of saying that peace and order are more important than justice. But when I cite King, I do so to invoke the memory of a radical Christian freedom fighter who was willing to sacrifice his own life to put everything on the line in the struggle for justice. That's the King whom I am invoking and whom I honor and revere. At any rate, as King put it, the one thing that we usually remember about the story is that Rip Van Winkle slept for 20 years. But there is another point in that little story that is almost completely overlooked. It was the sign in the inn from which Rip went up to the mountains for his long sleep. When Rip Van Winkle went up into the mountain, the sign in the inn had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down 20 years later, there was a picture of George Washington, the President of the United States. When Rip Van Winkle looked up at the picture of George Washington, and looking at the picture, he was confused and amazed. He was completely lost. He didn't know who he was. And this detail reveals to us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that Rip slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up in the mountain, a revolution was taking place that would change the course of history, and Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. He slept through a revolution. And one of the great liabilities of life is that all too many people find themselves living amid a great period of social change, and yet they fail to develop the new attitudes, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. We're living in exciting times, trying times to be sure, times that challenge virtually every aspect of our existence, that challenge our most closely held values, beliefs, and assumptions. but exciting times nonetheless, times that seem lit up from within with the possibility of real, lasting, meaningful, positive change and transformation. I hope and pray that we will not find ourselves slumbering through the next American Revolution. I hope and pray that, rooted in our deep commitment to love and justice, we will all actively work to transform our own attitudes and actions, to alter or abolish structures of oppression, and to help put in their place a country that is transformed, a country and a world in which everyone, for the first time in our history, truly enjoys the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. May it be so. Amen. I'd like to share just a few things about the song that we're about to sing, America the Beautiful. It's not one that we sing very often. In 1893, Catherine Bates, an English professor at Wellesley College, took a train trip to Colorado Springs in Colorado to teach a short summer school session at Colorado College at that time. Several of the sights on her trip inspired her, and they found their way into her poem, including a World Expo in Chicago, which is the alabaster city that she speaks of, the wheat fields of America's heartland, Kansas, and the majestic view of the Great Plains from high atop Pikes Peak. Bates, who lived and traveled with her partner Catherine Coleman for more than 25 years, personally experienced sexist prejudice and discrimination, and had witnessed the ravages of the Industrial Revolution in both America and Britain, as well as seeing firsthand urban poverty and misery. She keenly wished for equality, and it was this desire for an inclusive American brotherhood, in the words of that era, that inspired the poem America the Beautiful, which was written during the severe economic depression of 1893. The music by Samuel Ward, who was an Episcopalian organist and choir master from New Jersey, was joined with the poem in 1910 and became the most popular of several musical settings of that poem. One of the verses that is seldom sung, but which we are singing today, includes the following words: America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till selfish gain no longer stain the banner of the free. Please rise in body and or spirit and join us in singing America the Beautiful.
Spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above clean, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. This week, our designated offering will benefit the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. The NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund is one of America's premier legal organizations for fighting for racial justice. Through litigation, advocacy, and public education, the Legal Defense Fund seeks structural changes to expand democracy, eliminate disparities, and achieve racial justice in a society that will fulfill the promise of equality for all Americans. If you'd like to make a donation via our online giving system, you can do so one of two ways. You can go to our website, sunnyhill.org, and click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the step-by-step instructions. Once you get to the drop-down menu, just choose either 2020 Pledge if you're paying on a pledge, or Designated Collections if you are giving today to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. If you're texting a gift toward your pledge, dial that number, 412-324-3130. Enter $amount followed by the word pledge, or for the designated offering, $amount followed by the word special. You can also mail a check the old-fashioned way, and you can find our mailing address on our website, sunnyhill.org. Thank you for your generosity.
Please join us in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words, titled Dependence Day, were written by John Daniel. It would be a quieter holiday, no fireworks or loud parades, no speeches, no salutes to any flag. A day of staying home instead of crowding away. A day we celebrate nothing gained in war, but what we're given. How the sun's warmth is democratic, touching everyone, and the rain too is democratic. How the strongest branches in the wind give themselves as they resist and give themselves. How birds could have no freedom without the planet's weight to wing against. How Earth itself could come to be only when a whirling cloud of dust pledged allegiance as a world circling dependently around a star. And the star blossomed into fire from the ashes of other stars, and once, at the dark zero of our time, a blaze of revolutionary light exploded out of nowhere, out of nothing, because nothing needed the light, as the brilliance of the light itself needs nothing. Go in peace.